Welcome back to the TheMadHuman channel. Tonight, we tilt the world gently on its axis and ask a question that smells of starlight and rumor. What if Earth wasn't our first home? Not as a neat sci-fi twist with warp drives and neat maps, but as a slow, strange unspooling of memory, migration, loss, and return. A story threaded through geology, myth, and the quiet ache of things remembered poorly. Tonight, we follow that possibility. The traces, the echoes, the architecture of civilizations that might have existed before this blue sphere became home. We listen for footprints not in mud, but in habit, in culture, in the shapes of our bones and the geometry of our cities. We ask, what would it mean to be returnees, exiles of an origin planet we never named? Imagine, at first, not a dramatic departure, no cinematic launch under applause, but a long, patient migration. An advanced civilization, ancient beyond our telescopes, faces slow, cataclysmic shifts. A star brightening on a millennial scale, a planetary orbit wobbling with inexorable horror, a fungal plague that slips through the best defenses. They do not panic so much as plan, harvest their knowledge, and fold a civilization into vessels and vaults, not of steel only, but of culture, ritual, language, and encoded memory. They map trajectories by mathematics older than the stories we call myths. They seed life-preserving arcs into the dark, and then they leave. Leaving takes time, cunning, and a terrible kind of tenderness. You choose what to bring. Not only DNA banks and seed vaults, but songs, recipes, laws, heuristics for living on new rocks. You compress centuries of thought into protocols for raising children who will grow up under alien skies. You encode stories to keep identity because you understand how a people can evaporate without a story to carry them. And when the engines of escape finally flare, it's neither triumph nor defeat. It is a measured sorrow, an acceptance that the cradle cannot be saved and that survival will demand forgetting and remembering in equal measure. Centuries pass in transit and the travelers adapt. People born between stars learn to cradle microgravity as if it were a lullaby. They grow old with light from a star whose name their grandparents never spoke. Language shifts. Metaphors tied to tides make no sense in the hush of a generation ship. New metaphors arise out of ion storms and recycled gardens. Some communities hoard the old stories like relics. Others call for forgetting to survive. The culture fragments, and so does the memory of home. 1,000 years of travel will smooth edges faster than any ocean. The first planet fetishized as an ancestral myth, then a calendar holiday, then an almost forgotten dream. Finally, a generation born under artificial suns arrives in a new system. The new world is not home, not at first. The air tastes wrong. The seasons misbehave. The soil takes learning. And yet, there is a relief. Gravity to stand on, horizons to cross, rivers to follow. Cities grow like graphs. Old engineering principles reshaped by new materials, rituals adapted to new constellations. But something inside the children of that first landing keeps looking upward and backward, as if waiting to echo a word that is gone. Imagine now the impossible. The descendants, eager and restless, become explorers again. They are not driven by nostalgia only but by that strange human itch, to know where they came from. Perhaps after millennia their astronomers detect an old whisper, a spectral signature, an anomalous artifact deep in a neighboring system, a telltale ring of ruins orbiting a burnt-out star that might be their ancestral cradle. Or perhaps it is not astronomy at all but a story, a poem, a star map embroidered into ritual cloth that points like a compass toward a pale world their ancestors once knew. The decision to return is not simple. It requires faith, tech, and a willingness to become seekers of a past whose people might have perished or evolved into something else entirely. When returners arrive, they find not the tidy museums of memory but palimpsests. Layers of plans erased and overwritten by catastrophe and time. Cities half buried in mineral glaciers. Terraces where orchards once grew replaced by basalt. Religious centers where prayers were once recited now hollow, their acoustics still shaping silence. The architecture is both familiar and alien, geometry that echoes the migrants' engineering, but with organic growths that suggest alternate choices. The landscape holds stubborn traces. Canals redirected in ways that mirror the arcologies the returners built back home. Species that once were domestic now wild and distant cousins to those aboard the ships. And the hardest truth: there may be people who remember differently. Those who never left, the survivors, the long adapted, have myths of visitors, gods, or monstrous skyships. Their memory is not ours. Their calendar counts different catastrophes and different celebrations. Encounters between returners and holdouts are conversations across millennia. Some meetings spark joy and rediscovery. Others flare into violence. The pain of being both foreign and kin can be explosive. Here is a truth the tales seldom soften. Returning home is not redemption. Home, after millennia of storms and silence, is foreign territory. Those who remained adapted, reinterpreted the old myths into new ethics. Those who return bring technologies that will heal and wound in equal measures. Now place Earth in this pattern as a thought experiment. Consider the riddles wedged into our own archaeology and myth, inexplicable alignments of megaliths, near-universal flood stories, similarities in mythic icons separated by oceans. What if some of these are not mere coincidence but cultural fossils, the faint chiming of a migration story so old it got refracted across continents? What if the seeds of agriculture, the cognitive leaps in mathematics and sky observation, the uncanny global resonances in ritual and narrative, what if they are echoes not only of independent invention but also of guidance passed across an interstellar diaspora? If Earth were not the cradle but a later dock, our myths about golden ages and deserts filled with bones begin to look like something else. Attempts at translation. We would be heirs to multiple paleographies, different scripts of habit and living that once mapped other worlds. Our myths of paradise could be not literary metaphors but memories' thin, smudged maps, the cultural equivalent of an atlas page whose ink bled in transit. It reframes our origin stories into palimpsests, layers of actual geographies and remembered rites overwriting one another as people adapted to new suns. The idea that humanity might be a returnee species bends physics into a softer question. What cues would survive long-term migration? DNA remembers environment through selection but rarely remembers cultural choices. Yet culture is stubborn. Songs survive, ritual forms persist, architectural preferences fossilize. The simplest human act, gathering by water, becomes ritualized choreography in a new world where water hides subterraneously. A religious gesture becomes a gardening technique. Even language can carry relic forms. Metaphors tied to tides survive as proverbs about rhythm, waves, and return. The archaeological record would hold oddities, tools designed for an environment different from the one they're found in, plants and soil layers foreign to their original range, isotopic signatures hinting that bones once feasted on unlocal diets. Imagine the anthropology of the long return. Linguists scratching their heads at cognates scattered in odd places. Archaeologists puzzling over tool morphologies that look derived but mismatched with rock types. And geneticists finding haplogroups with odd mutational clocks. Myths would be re-examined not as poetic residue but as encoded navigation. star lore reinterpreted as pointers, epics reframed as mnemonic devices for orbital mechanics. Our nightly gaze at constellations framed as a cultural practice for reading return routes across the black. Then there is the ethical knot. If Earth were not a first home, our stewardship of it would look different. We would carry obligations written into culture for caretaking a new land stated in our oldest rites, protocols for seed tending, for contaminant avoidance, for ritualized restraint. The culpability and compassion in such a scenario are double-edged. We would be inheritors of both technology and responsibility. Colonization would have been not only necessity but covenant. We went because we had to, we remained because we had to, and now we must repair what we cannot reverse entirely. Imagine cultures with holidays that are not remembrance of loss but formal promises to heal a planet whose scars our ancestors once made. And then the metaphysical consequence. Identity itself expands. If humans have been planet hopping, the question "where are we from?" becomes plural. Our origins would be a braided narrative, a lineage of planetary homes, rituals, and migrations. The human self becomes cosmic, not just terrestrial. Our myths would start to make sense as migration manuals, and our longing for the stars becomes genetically and culturally enshrined, an ache encoded in bone and nursery rhyme alike. But this is not only sadness or humility. There is a strange exhilaration in realizing we might be part of a longer pattern of resilience and return. It lends a new dignity to human improvisation, to the stubborn small acts of repair. Planting, patching, teaching children to read old stars. The story of a species that learned to leave, remember, and return is also a story about adaptability, patience, and a certain moral grandeur. The willingness to accept loss yet keep a map in your head for future generations to follow. If Earth was not our first home, the archaeological record, the myths, the genetic oddities, and the rituals scattered worldwide are not anomalies. They are testimonies. They ask us to become better listeners. They ask us to reframe our science into a practice that values narrative alongside data, ceremony alongside isotopes. They ask us to hold paradox, to be both pioneers and children of a previous world, to be responsible for what we inherit and curious about what we cannot yet prove. Tonight's question, what if Earth wasn't our first home, is a door. When you stand in it, you hear two sounds. Wind moving across a ruined terrace on an unnamed world and waves breaking on a shoreline you call home. Both are the same ocean in different timescales. Both are the music of continuity, renovation, and the stubborn human refusal to vanish without leaving a song. If we are returnees, then every step on our planet is an act of remembering and of deciding how to be caretakers now that the trek has ended, at least for a while. Picture this: a team of archaeologists in the Atacama Desert dusting away at what they think is a ceremonial site. The stones form a ring, but the geometry isn't quite human. It's too precise, too mathematically tuned, a series of angles that line up with constellations that aren't even visible in the sky anymore. When they chart it, they realize those alignments only make sense from a position far from Earth, as if the architects had mapped their sky from another planet, a different perspective entirely. They've built memory into stone, not for worship, but for remembrance of a lost horizon. Now imagine walking through that site at night. The stars above don't match the engravings carved into the rock. You hold a torch against the markings, and the shadows fall in strange patterns. Suddenly, you notice that when the shadows align, they point east, not toward any star we know, but toward the faint glow of a long-forgotten memory, encoded in architecture. It feels less like archaeology and more like decoding a letter left by ancestors who never intended to be forgotten. And then myths. They all whisper of somewhere else, don't they? The Garden of Eden, Atlantis, Hyperborea, Lemuria, the Star People in Native American traditions, the Seven Sisters stories tied to the Pleiades from Australia to Africa to the Americas. Cultures separated by oceans and time all insist that we came from somewhere else. What if these weren't poetic inventions? What if they were fragmented survival guides, oral traditions from a people who had to anchor their children in the memory of migration? If the journey was real, then every myth is less about fantasy and more about coded instruction. How to look up, how to read the sky, how to remember where home once was. Now shift again. Think about biology. Why do humans seem so out of place on Earth? Sunburned so easily, yet hairless compared to other primates. Weak night vision. Fragile infants that require years of care. Anthropologists explain this as quirks of evolution, but others argue, what if we are badly adapted to this planet because we weren't born here? We sweat differently, we tire easily under UV radiation, we crave salt in unnatural amounts, we dream obsessively of flying, of escaping gravity. Could these be faint echoes of our physiology adjusting to a world long gone? What if our bones are shaped by a planet with lighter gravity? What if our psychology was forged under skies with different constellations, different moons, different cycles, and here on Earth we simply don't fully fit? Picture a forgotten civilization that understood this. They didn't just migrate once. They planned for cycles of exile and return, understanding that worlds bloom and worlds die. Maybe Earth wasn't their first stop. Maybe it was just the most recent station in a long chain of planetary homes. Their intelligence wasn't just technological, it was cultural, encoding survival into art, into myth, into DNA itself. Think of how salmon know to return upstream, or how migratory birds navigate by magnetic fields. What if humanity's strange, unexplainable longing for the stars is that same instinct, buried deep, not wanderlust but memory? And then comes the unsettling twist. What if we're not the only returners here? What if others from that first home also scattered and Earth wasn't their destination? What if scattered branches of our kind exist across the galaxy, each carrying their own rituals, their own myths of loss, their own fractured identities? And maybe, just maybe, the things we call UFOs, the visitors whispered about for centuries, are not aliens at all, but relatives. Not strangers, but siblings who never lost their way back. The Earth, then, is not just a planet. It's a story, a waypoint, a return site. Every fossil, every ruin, every myth is not just history but a breadcrumb in a trail across galaxies. And tonight, as we talk about it, we feel that echo again, not just curiosity but a pull. A sense that our bones, our songs, our rituals are all telling us the same thing. This is not where it began. This is where we returned. Imagine standing in a cavern deep beneath Turkey, somewhere within the labyrinth of Derinkuyu, the underground city carved with precision thousands of years ago. Scholars explain it as a refuge from invasion, but pause. Why does it descend so far? Why the ventilation shafts? Why the complexity? What if it wasn't a bunker against human enemies, but a shelter from planetary trauma? A civilization remembering cataclysms not of armies, but of skies, of worlds cracking, of migrations between planets. These cities might not have been the first attempt at survival. They could have been practice for exile, training grounds for generations who would one day need to live beneath stars that were not their own. Now imagine in one of those stone chambers, a fresco crude, half erased by time. At first, it looks like concentric circles, but when reconstructed digitally, it resembles an orbital diagram. Multiple worlds, a trajectory carved between them, and a tiny arc that ends in what looks eerily like Earth. Was this artwork or was it a message? Did someone try to paint the road home on stone walls, hoping future descendants would one day decode it? And what about the myths of lost paradises? Atlantis sinking beneath waves, Lemuria swallowed by oceans, the Mayan stories of cycles of destruction. To most, these are metaphors. But what if they are refracted memories of planetary loss? Imagine a child hearing stories of their ancestors' world that drowned not in water, but in radiation storms or tectonic upheaval. Over centuries, the cosmic becomes local, the space ark becomes a great boat, the failing biosphere becomes a flood, the survivors become gods and culture heroes. Myths are not lies. They are memory made bearable, simplified so children can carry it. What if Earth's great flood stories are not about Earth at all, but about our first home collapsing under catastrophe? Shift to another angle. Archaeogenetics. Scientists today find inexplicable anomalies in the human genome, fragments that don't line up with known evolutionary pathways, bursts of intelligence and language that seem to arrive too suddenly. What if those jumps were not accidents, but deliberate seeding by ancestors who remembered other worlds? If Earth was not our first home, then maybe we arrived with kits encoded in us, survival protocols hidden in DNA, waiting to be unlocked by certain environments. Our creativity, our restless dreaming, our constant urge to innovate. Could that be the faint hum of survival instincts honed across planets? Not just one? And here's where it gets truly haunting. Imagine a discovery tomorrow. A vault buried deep in the Arctic, beneath the ice. Inside, not treasure, not weapons, but artifacts that don't match Earth's geology. Metallic alloys unknown in natural formation. Seeds genetically incompatible with Earth flora. A library of symbols that eerily resemble alphabets scattered across civilizations. Suddenly, the question isn't if Earth was our first home, but why we left the others. Were we fleeing catastrophe? Were we guided by a higher intelligence that shepherds species across the stars? Or were we exiles, cast out from a greater civilization, condemned to survive here until we were ready to remember? Think about that word, exile. What if our existential loneliness, our endless search for meaning, isn't just philosophy? What if it's memory, a deep, buried ache for a home we can't name anymore? The feeling of not belonging on Earth, burning in the sun, staring at stars with longing, could be the soul of a species that once belonged elsewhere, remembering poorly. We are the amnesiacs of the galaxy, building telescopes not just out of curiosity but because something in us screams. We've been here before, and we must find it again. Now bring it closer. Picture a night ritual in an ancient village. A circle of dancers move in patterns that make no sense to outsiders. Steps forward, steps back, spiral turns. But when viewed from above, the choreography mirrors orbital mechanics, planets swinging around a star. The villagers don't know why they dance this way. It is simply tradition. Yet hidden in their movements is a map of homecoming, a ritual encoding the memory of the Great Migration. Dance as archive, myth as compass. And here's the sharpest thought. What if Earth is not the end, but only the middle of the journey? If we returned once, who is to say we won't return again, not to Earth but from Earth? Our children may one day look back at this planet the way we look back at our mythical paradises. A beautiful place, lost, remembered in fragments. Earth, too, may one day be the myth, the cradle that wasn't the cradle at all, but just another stop in the eternal human odyssey. Think about the Pleiades, the star cluster worshipped, sung about, and mythologized by civilizations scattered across Earth with no known connection. The Greeks told of 7 sisters chased across the heavens. The Japanese called them Subaru. The Maori wove them into Matariki, a sign of seasonal rebirth. The Native American Lakota, the Aztecs, and the Aboriginal Australians all gazed at the same stars, and all somehow told stories that tied their fate to that shimmering cluster. How? Why? Could it be coincidence? Or is it a forgotten breadcrumb trail, a collective memory of origin? Imagine if the Pleiades were not just stars, but coordinates. What if they were once our beacon, the last visible sign of where we had come from, etched into sky maps so that no matter how far we traveled, no matter how much memory we lost, every child born beneath Earth's heavens would see the same cluster and feel something stir in their blood. Not recognition exactly, but longing. And here's the eerie part. Modern astronomy confirms the Pleiades cluster is still relatively young in cosmic terms, filled with hot blue stars, not ideal candidates for long-term life-bearing systems. But what if that's only true now? What if, in the deep past, there was something else there? Something habitable, something thriving before stellar evolution burned it away. Could the myths we preserve be not just stories of stars, but memorials of a lost homeland? Now let's shift underground. Archaeologists in Bolivia and Peru still puzzle over Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, sites of stonework so precise that modern machines would struggle to replicate them. Blocks weighing hundreds of tons carved with laser-like accuracy, as though they were once part of something greater than a simple human city. Some researchers speculate about advanced ancient tools. But what if these weren't just cities? What if they were memory vaults, engineered monuments designed to last longer than memory itself, encoding fragments of a civilization that new humanity would forget? Imagine chiseling messages into stone not to communicate with your neighbor, but to whisper across epochs. Imagine carving star maps into megaliths not to honor the sky, but to point future generations toward their origin. When we stand at these sites, when we run our fingers along grooves that have survived earthquakes and wars, maybe we are not just tourists or scientists. Maybe we are witnesses to our own forgotten history, and it doesn't stop with stone. Look to our own biology. Did you know there are neural anomalies in the human brain that suggest sudden leaps of complexity? Entire regions with no clear evolutionary pathway. Scientists chalk it up to accelerated mutation. But what if it's more? What if intelligence didn't emerge here but was carried here, like cargo hidden in genetic code? Imagine if the mind itself is a traveler, seated across worlds until it finds a vessel strong enough to remember. That vessel, right now, is us. But perhaps we are not the first to carry it. Now picture this. Deep within the Arctic ice, a drilling expedition stumbles upon metallic spheres embedded in layers of permafrost millions of years old, alloys resistant to corrosion, etched with patterns no culture today recognizes. At first, they are dismissed as anomalies, geological accidents. But then, when scanned under high-frequency resonance, they hum. Not like machines, not like tools, but like memory devices holding information locked in frequencies beyond human language. The data begins to leak, revealing glimpses of a star system long gone, of landscapes alien yet familiar, of voices that sound almost human, but not quite. Suddenly, the idea that Earth was our first home collapses, replaced by a new narrative. We are the children of memory, carrying fragments of a diaspora so vast it spans the galaxy. And here's the psychological twist. If this is true, then our myths of gods descending from the sky may not be fantasy, but distorted recall. Ancient humans, catching echoes of contact with beings who were not divine but ancestral, magnified by awe and fear. Gods may simply have been those who remembered more than the rest, fragments of a civilization returning to check on its exiled kin. Over time, their visits became miracles. Their technology became magic. Their warnings became commandments. So when we ask, what if Earth wasn't our first home? Maybe the better question is, what if we are the scattered survivors of a civilization still guiding us, quietly, invisibly, across the long night of forgetting? Have you ever wondered why so many of humanity's greatest religions and philosophies are obsessed with return? Return to Eden. Return to the stars. Return to enlightenment. Return to a golden age we've supposedly lost. Why is it that across cultures, the human soul aches for something behind us, something unreachable, something we can't quite name? Maybe it isn't nostalgia for this earth at all. Maybe it's a genetic grief, a memory lodged in bone and blood that whispers, we were somewhere else before, and it was different. The Buddhist cycle of samsara, life, death, rebirth, could be more than spiritual metaphor. It could be cosmic memory. The cycle of civilizations, planets, and migrations, each life a faint echo of a journey older than history. Think about dreams. Why is it that some people dream of landscapes they've never seen? Alien skies, cities of impossible geometry, oceans with two moons rising above them. Psychologists call it imagination. But what if dreams are the leakage of memory, the subconscious trying to process fragments of lives lived on other worlds? What if every dream of flying, of falling, of breathing underwater is a fossilized echo of past survival, encoded in us from the times when we adapted to alien conditions? Now let's follow that thread into art. Across the world, ancient cave paintings show not just animals and hunts, but strange beings with elongated heads, starbursts, spiral motifs. Scholars interpret them as shamanic visions. But what if they were field reports, attempts by early humans to record what their minds still remembered, what their DNA still pulsed with? A memory not of Earth, but of the skies we once crossed. Consider this chilling possibility. Our creativity itself, our endless drive to paint, to sing, to build, to tell stories, might be the survival instinct of a displaced species. On our first home, perhaps creativity was how we endured catastrophe, how we passed knowledge when words failed, how we turned despair into survival. On Earth, stripped of memory, that instinct became art. But art may not be luxury. Art may be code, a way of remembering what can't be spoken. Now picture an archaeologist centuries from now, sifting through the rubble of our own civilization. She finds fragments of film reels, scraps of music, shattered sculptures. To her, they seem nonsensical, abstract, indulgent. But what if she realizes all of it points back to the stars? That even in our amnesia, even in our distraction, every brushstroke and every verse is secretly pointing to where we came from. And here is the psychological dagger. If this is true, then our loneliness as a species is not accidental. It is the wound of exile. It explains why, despite technology, despite comfort, so many humans feel incomplete, restless, searching. It explains why we build telescopes that stare into blackness, why we send messages to space with no guarantee of reply, why we ache at the sight of a night sky. We are not simply curious. We are homesick. We are haunted. Now consider this: what if those who guided us once are still guiding us? Not through grand ships splitting the skies, but through subtler means, nudging our myths, seeding our DNA, whispering in the subconscious. Perhaps they knew that direct contact would overwhelm us. Perhaps they chose to guide us gently, invisibly, until we could face the truth without shattering. What if every leap in our history, the fire, the wheel, the written word, electricity, was not just human brilliance, but tiny sparks rekindled from a greater flame we once carried? And if so, then the greatest secret is not that Earth wasn't our first home. The greatest secret is that we are not lost. We are still being shepherded, still being remembered, still being pulled forward along a path that began long before Earth was green, and will continue long after Earth is gone. Imagine this. A group of scientists in the Atacama Desert uncovers a perfectly preserved skeleton, not millions of years old, but a mere 12,000. The bones belong to no known species. The cranium is too large, the spinal column too advanced, the joints engineered for endurance. At first, it's dismissed as a deformity. But under scanning electron microscopy, the DNA reveals something that shouldn't exist. A gene sequence untraceable to Earth's biosphere. No plant, no animal, no fungus matches. It is alien, but not alien enough to be other. It is us, a version of us that came before us. A reminder that maybe we didn't evolve here at all. Maybe we arrived. Maybe we carried our biology with us. If Earth wasn't our first home, then every missing link in evolution may not be missing at all. It may be misplaced. Lost not in time, but in transit. Our history may be fragmented because we are the survivors of a journey so vast that memory couldn't survive intact. What we call gaps in anthropology may actually be gaps in arrival. Moments when the survivors were still scattering, still rebuilding, still adapting, before the story could stabilize again. Now think about Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the 12,000-year-old temple that predates writing, agriculture, even cities. The carvings show animals, stars, and symbols that suggest complex cosmology. Why would hunter-gatherers build such a structure? Why would they invest in stone circles aligned to the sky? Unless they were rebuilding memory. Unless this wasn't the first time humans looked to the stars for guidance. Maybe Göbekli Tepe was not a beginning, but a restoration. A reminder written in stone, encoded for descendants who would one day forget. The same can be said of Egyptian pyramids, Mayan temples, Angkor Wat, Stonehenge. We call them monuments. But what if they are navigation markers, memory vaults, and coded star maps left behind by those who knew we would forget? Each one pointing not just up to the heavens but back to our first home. A cosmic breadcrumb trail written in stone, across continents, across millennia. But let's go deeper into the subconscious mind. Why do children draw suns with faces, skies filled with shapes, beings with eyes too large? Why do so many children invent imaginary friends who speak in strange patterns, who teach them songs or symbols beyond their age? Are these not echoes of ancestral memories bleeding through the fragile barrier of youth before social conditioning buries them? Could the imaginary friend be the brain's attempt to remember teachers from another world? Guides who once helped us survive the migration? Psychologists often describe collective unconscious as a reservoir of shared archetypes. But what if Carl Jung was unknowingly brushing against genetic memory? What if those archetypes, the flood, the sky father, the serpent, the tree of life, are not inventions but reflections of the journey? The flood is not allegory, but a remembrance of leaving a dying world. The sky father is not God, but the figure who led the migration. The serpent, winding and eternal, is not symbol, but the path of stars themselves, the cosmic river we once traveled. And still we search. We search in telescopes, in particle accelerators, in dream journals. We send signals out into the void, hoping someone will answer. But maybe the answer is already inside us. Maybe the human drive to expand, to colonize, to move ever outward isn't just curiosity. It's instinct. The instinct of a species that has already done it, that remembers dimly what it means to be travelers, that knows, without knowing why, that Earth will not be the last stop. Here's where it gets darker. What if we didn't come here willingly? What if Earth is not sanctuary, but exile? Imagine a civilization so vast it spanned multiple worlds. Imagine a faction, a rebellion, an experiment gone wrong. Imagine punishment, not of execution, but of banishment. We were cast here, stripped of memory, told to begin again, until we were ready to atone or return. This would explain our existential restlessness, our feeling of being cut off from something greater. Exile is not just punishment. It is disconnection. And maybe our loneliness is not spiritual at all, but political. Maybe we are prisoners who have forgotten our crime. Yet, even in exile, guides may remain. Think about the strange bursts in human progress. The sudden leap to agriculture, the invention of writing, the Industrial Revolution, the digital age. Each leap seems disproportionate to the slow crawl of evolution. Almost as if, every so often, someone or something nudges us forward. A whisper in the mind of a mathematician, a dream in the head of an inventor, a vision in the heart of a prophet. Progress doesn't always look like machinery. Sometimes it looks like revelation. And revelation may not be divine. It may be ancestral. Now let's shift to the stars themselves. If Earth wasn't our first home, then the skies are not just beautiful, they are maps. The Pleiades, Sirius, Orion. Star systems that appear obsessively in myth across cultures. Coincidence or coordinates? Astronomers today know Sirius is a binary system. Orion is rich in nebulae where stars are born. Could these have been waypoints? Could our ancestors have chosen these constellations not for their beauty, but because they once marked the road? Picture this. A future discovery of an alien ruin not on Mars or the Moon, but right here on Earth, buried deep beneath tectonic plates. A ruin older than Earth's continents. Technology that proves we didn't just come here, we crashed here. A failed colony ship buried in the Earth's crust, its survivors becoming the seeds of humanity. Suddenly, our myths, our religions, our art, our longing, all of it would snap into focus. We are not children of Earth. We are the orphans of stars. And the greatest psychological twist? What if the ancient civilization still guides us, but not with ships or lights in the sky? What if they guide us through instinct, inspiration, memory, and myth? A civilization so advanced it no longer needs to intervene physically. It simply planted the seeds, knowing that one day, when we were ready, we would remember. So maybe Earth was never meant to be permanent. Maybe it was always meant to be temporary shelter. A cradle, yes, but not the cradle. A home, yes, but not the first. And maybe, as we build rockets, as we scan skies, as we dream of Mars and beyond, we are not inventing the future. We are remembering the past. If Earth wasn't our first home, then there's a question we've all ignored, maybe out of fear. What happened to the first one? Was it destroyed? Was it abandoned? Or does it still exist? Alive, inhabited, thriving without us? The possibilities are as terrifying as they are intoxicating. Imagine this, a planet much like Earth orbiting a sun long extinguished. Its oceans boiled, its atmosphere stripped away, its civilizations burned to dust. The ruins lie beneath layers of ash, silent reminders of what once was. If this was our home, then we are survivors of catastrophe. Our myths of floods and fires, our instinctive fear of apocalypse, not prophecy but memory. Every warning of doom across cultures may be the echo of a trauma too deep to erase. Humanity, in this view, is not a species of builders but of escapees. We did not rise. We fled. But what if the opposite is true? What if our first home still thrives? What if another branch of humanity, the ones who stayed behind, never forgot? They may have continued evolving, building, expanding while we, the exiles, lost everything. To them, we would appear as children, stunted, fragile, dangerous in our ignorance. And perhaps they are still watching, waiting to see if their forgotten kin will ever grow enough to rejoin them. Here lies the psychological fracture. If there are others, humans or near humans, who never left, then our entire sense of superiority collapses. We are not the pinnacle of evolution. We are the branch that withered, the survivors of a crash, the amnesiacs of the species. Imagine the existential wound of realizing we are not the main story, but the side story. Not the chosen, but the abandoned. And yet, something in us refuses to accept that fate. We build, we reach, we search. We launch satellites into blackness. We send golden records into the void, carrying our languages, our music, our dreams. On some level, maybe we already know the truth. We are sending postcards home. Not to strangers, but to family. Not to aliens, but to ourselves. Let's step into the terrain of memory once more. Across shamanic traditions, altered states of consciousness reveal landscapes not of this earth. Crystalline cities, luminous beings, endless networks of light. Western science dismisses these as hallucinations, chemical storms in the brain. But what if they are doorways? What if they are not imaginations, but remembrances, visions of a world we once knew, now buried beneath layers of biology and time? The brain may not be inventing. The brain may be remembering. Psychedelics, rituals, meditation. All may be methods of unlocking the buried archive of our first home. Even modern physics hints at this. Quantum entanglement suggests connections across vast distances, instant communication beyond space and time. Could our minds be quantum receivers? Could fragments of memory from another world be bleeding into us through entangled particles that never forgot their origin? The idea seems insane until you consider that nearly everything we do already stretches beyond logic. We grieve stars we never touched. We long for landscapes we've never seen. We are haunted by places we cannot name. That is not accident. That is inheritance. Now consider one more unsettling thought. If we came here, we may not have come alone. What if other species from our first home traveled too? Some may have perished. Others may have adapted into myths, creatures whispered of but never proven. The serpent gods, the giants, the watchers. Could these be survivors of the migration, altered by Earth's environment but carrying the same origin as us? When myths speak of wars between gods and men, maybe they are not allegory at all but history, the memory of conflict between surviving factions of exiles. If this is true, then humanity's story is not one of isolated emergence, but of fractured survival. Earth is not the beginning, but the middle of a longer journey. And maybe, just maybe, it is not the end either. Look around at the modern world. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, space exploration. These are not random achievements. They are the reconstruction of a path once traveled. We are rebuilding what we lost piece by piece without even knowing why. Every rocket we launch, every genome we map, every network we create, they feel new, but they may be rehearsals. Practice for returning to the place we can't name, but never forgot. And if that's true, then the next century won't just be technological. It will be psychological. Humanity will face the most shattering realization in history, that Earth is temporary, that home is elsewhere, that what we've called progress is actually memory resurfacing. And the moment we are ready to admit it, truly admit it, may be the moment the veil lifts and the truth floods in. Maybe they will return, or maybe they never left. If Earth was not our first home, then the greatest evidence is not in ruins or bones, but in the unshakable instincts that drive humanity. We are restless. We are never satisfied with stability. We build empires only to dismantle them. We chase new frontiers with manic obsession, whether they are geographical, technological, or spiritual. This restlessness is not simply survival instinct. It is memory, the memory of displacement, the memory of movement, a wound carved into our collective psyche that whispers, "You are not where you belong." Why do we dream of Eden? Why does every mythology have a paradise lost, a golden age, a perfect world now out of reach? The Greeks called it the Age of Kronos. The Hindus spoke of Satya Yuga. The Abrahamic faiths told of Eden. These are not isolated inventions. They are converging echoes of something our species once knew, a world before Earth, a first home. And deep inside, we feel it still. We ache for it. We build myths around it, pray for it, mourn it, and yet cannot fully name it. Consider the human obsession with the stars. Long before telescopes, long before science, nomadic tribes carved sky maps into stone. Ancient Egyptians aligned pyramids with Orion's belt. The Dogon people of Mali described Sirius as a binary system centuries before modern astronomy confirmed it. Why? Why such precise obsession with stars that should mean nothing to earthbound survival? Unless they meant something else, not guides to crops or navigation, but coordinates. The map back to where we came from. But if there was a first home, what happened to it? This question haunts like a ghost. Did we flee catastrophe? Did we escape war, famine, cosmic disaster? Imagine a world once lush and thriving, its people advanced beyond comprehension, brought low by their own arrogance or by forces beyond control. Imagine survivors, desperate, carrying fragments of knowledge, scattering across space, finding Earth as sanctuary. If so, then humanity is not a species of progress but of trauma. We are survivors of apocalypse, rebuilding with fragments, haunted by the memory of collapse. That would explain our obsession with end times, our constant fear of global annihilation. We don't just fear it, we remember it. And yet, another possibility chills the soul. What if the first home wasn't destroyed? What if it still exists, thriving without us? If we are the exiles, the refugees, the outcasts, then another branch of our species may have continued evolving, advancing, expanding into the galaxy. To them, we are broken cousins, children cut off from the whole. They may see us as fragile, dangerous, or unworthy. They may be watching, waiting, guiding in shadows, testing whether we can ever be rejoined with them. This is where archaeology becomes a battlefield. Every year, discoveries emerge that rewrite history. Ruins older than civilization should allow, carvings of beings that do not match humans, star maps in places where they should not exist. Göbekli Tepe, pyramids aligned with stars. Nanostructures in 2-billion-year-old rock formations. Artifacts that don't fit the timeline. Most are dismissed as anomalies. But what if they are not anomalies at all? What if they are evidence? Evidence of memory. Evidence of survival. Evidence of arrival. But humanity is not ready. Not yet. That is why the evidence is always buried, disputed, suppressed. The truth is too heavy. To admit it would dismantle the story we tell ourselves about being Earth's children, about being nature's pinnacle. To accept it would mean rewriting every religion, every science, every identity. We would no longer be of Earth. We would be from somewhere else. And yet, the cracks in the facade keep widening. Our DNA itself tells a story we cannot ignore. Over 200 genes in the human genome have no known origin on Earth. They appear suddenly, without evolutionary precedent. Where did they come from? Evolution does not leap without reason, unless they were inserted, carried from another world, encoded in us by ancestors who refused to let the journey erase everything. Our DNA may not be Earth's invention at all. It may be a star map written in flesh. Now let's step into the realm of psychology. The phenomenon of déjà vu. Why do so many people feel they have been somewhere before, lived a moment before, seen a place they should not know? Neurology dismisses it as misfiring neurons. But what if déjà vu is not error, but memory leakage? A flash of recognition from a past life, not on Earth but on the world before. Every déjà vu, every strange familiarity, may be a glimpse through the veil, a reminder of the first home. And then there are dreams. Dreams of flying, of breathing underwater, of landscapes with impossible skies. Why does the brain invent these? What purpose do they serve in survival? None, unless they are fragments of the past. Memories encoded so deep in us that they surface when the conscious mind shuts down. The dream is not invention. The dream is remembrance. Almost too perfect. Was Earth chosen because it could preserve life long enough for us to heal? If so, then the ones who guided us here were not conquerors. They were caretakers. They gave us a new womb, a second chance. But if Earth is the ark, then the real question is, who is steering it? Is humanity truly in charge? Or are we still being nudged, prodded, guided? What if the leaps of history, fire, agriculture, the wheel, mathematics, electricity, digital computation were not natural steps but triggers? Keys turned at intervals by the ones who placed us here, ensuring we advance just enough, never too little, never too much. If so, then humanity's story is not invention, but orchestration. We are not authors. We are performers on a stage set long before we arrived. And maybe that explains the feeling that gnaws in quiet moments, that sense of being watched, guided, shaped. We are not paranoid. We are remembering. Imagine this. The civilization of the first home still exists, hidden in the black corridors of space, or in dimensions we cannot yet perceive. Perhaps they monitor us like gardeners tending a transplanted tree. Perhaps they whisper into our dreams, appear in visions, intervene in ways so subtle we call them coincidence. Perhaps when we look at ancient mysteries, pyramids, stone alignments, inexplicable knowledge, we are looking not at human achievement, but at reminders left by those who guided us here. Breadcrumbs scattered through history. But if they are still out there, why not return openly? Why not announce themselves? Perhaps because the experiment is not finished. Perhaps because they are waiting for us to remember on our own. To realize who we are, where we came from, and why we are here. To them, we are like children, and Earth is a classroom. The lesson is not given. It must be discovered. And what happens when we finally learn it? The moment of proof arrives the way most terrifying truths do. Small, quiet, and unstoppable. They call it the Acheron fragment at first, a name by committee, a neutral label to stop panic. It is found in the guts of a collapsed ruin under Antarctic ice, revealed by a melt that isn't natural but the result of a deep probing laser used to map subglacial channels. The probe returns an anomaly, a lattice of non-terrestrial alloy ordered in a fractal matrix. Not a meteor, not geological, manufactured. Within the lattice are microfilaments. Within those filaments are patterns, not crude runes but modulation patterns that resolve under Fourier reconstruction into something startlingly simple. A map. A star map, but not like any catalog astronomers use. It marks a route, a trajectory between worlds, and at its terminus, a geometry that matches a pattern carved into a ring of stones at Göbekli Tepe, matched again in Pumapunku, then again in a painted spiral in a cave outside Altamira. The same coordinates, encoded in stone and metal, in ice and pigment, across continents and epochs. When the map is published in a single leak torrent, images, raw data, spectral analyses, the world does not react with sane, measured curiosity. It reacts the only way human beings know how to react to the possibility of being uprooted in narrative. With hunger and with fear, scientists organize. At first there is denial, then rigor, then hunger. Teams of linguists run pattern recognition on myths. Tones in Sumerian tablets are remapped against modulation in the alloy. Parallels emerge, phrasings that repeat across traditions not as metaphor but as instruction. A priest's lament becomes a mnemonic. A lullaby becomes coordinates. A child's counting rhyme preserves the periodicity of an orbit. The very oddness of human culture, the redundancy of story, the same images repeated in separated valleys, becomes the archive of a diaspora. Field teams move quickly. There are midnight excavations in deserts, hurried cores out of Greenland permafrost, and the quiet seizure of artifacts from private collections that had been odd for decades. What surfaces is not polished certainty but a ragged, compelling collage. Seeds in a sealed ceramic that do not match Earth flora, isotopic ratios in bone that suggest diets with elements rare on Earth, stonework that uses tolerances of machining far beyond what prehistory should have allowed. The pattern is corroboration by accumulation. None of this singly would prove the migration thesis, but together the things press in like converging vectors. And while science accumulates, culture breaks. In remote villages, elders begin to hum songs their grandmothers taught that were always for no reason. Songs that, slowly, like mislaid keys fitting a lock, unlock details of the new map. In megacities, devout groups arise overnight, some proclaiming prophecies validated, others seeing blasphemy. Nations reconfigure policy. Religious leaders convene secret councils. Governments form advisory rings of scholars, shadow diplomats, and psyops strategists. Economies hiccup around any rumor of new finds. The press decides illogically, predictably, to dramatize. Two families feel the change most. In one, a field linguist named Imani, who has spent a life listening to the songs of coastal peoples, finds herself in a bare concrete lab with an engineer projecting the reconstructed signals across a wall. On the wall, a child's rhyme from her grandmother flickers into numbers. The engineer's voice is small. It's navigation, but encoded for storytelling. They gave children the map through nursery rhyme. Imani remembers running her fingers through salt wet hair as a child and sensing her grandmother's lullaby was an old thing. Older than the coast, older than the house. She weeps without expectation. In another, a man named Tomas, a second-generation miner in a city ringed by exhausted quarries, hears the leak on the radio and feels nothing at first, then a pressure like a hand closing in his chest. He once dreamed, as a boy, of 2 moons over a sea of purple glass, of a voice that said in a language he somehow knew, "Follow the light home." He had dismissed it as childhood fantasy, until a daytime documentary shows footage of a star map that matches his dream's curving nebula. His hands tremble as if remembering a grief. Now imagine the implications for religion. If Earth was not our first home, then perhaps gods are not gods at all. Perhaps they are memory figures, leaders of the migration, teachers from the first civilization, mythologized across millennia. The Sky Father, the Mother Goddess, the Serpent, the Floodbringer, all recurring across cultures. Are these not coincidences, but recollections? Heroes and rulers of the first home, remembered dimly through generations, worshipped by descendants who no longer understood. This would explain why religions converge, why so many myths repeat, why so many cultures dream of paradise lost, of gods descending from the sky, of knowledge gifted by beings of light. They are not invention. They are inheritance. They are fragments of the story of our exile, retold until the truth blurred into myth. And if this is true, then the deepest wound of humanity is not sin, not ignorance, not mortality. It is exile. We are homesick for a place we cannot name. We are haunted by a loss we cannot explain. Our wars, our greed, our endless hunger for more. All symptoms of displacement, of a species torn from its origin, scrambling to rebuild identity. But maybe exile is not punishment. Maybe it was survival. Maybe Earth is not a prison, but an ark. Maybe we were not banished, but rescued. Perhaps the first home was dying, and Earth was chosen as sanctuary. Perhaps we were guided here, carried here, protected here. If so, then the guides may still walk among us, not as aliens in ships, but as whispers in our blood, as instincts in our bones, as sudden flashes of genius in our minds. The guides may not be out there. They may be in us. Look at the leaps of progress. Fire, the wheel, agriculture, writing, electricity, the digital age. Each one sudden, each one disproportionate to the slow crawl of evolution. Did we invent them, or did we remember them? Did we rediscover what our ancestors once knew? Perhaps every breakthrough is not creation, but recollection. Not genius, but memory. Humanity is not progressing. Humanity is remembering. And if so, then the future is not unknown. The future is already written. We will leave Earth. We will return to the stars. We will find the first home, or what remains of it. And when we do, the greatest question will not be whether we can survive. It will be whether we can bear the truth of who we really are. Because if Earth was not our first home, then everything changes. We are not children of this planet. We are not accidents of evolution. We are not alone. We are survivors of something older, something greater, something hidden. And maybe, just maybe, the ones who brought us here are still waiting for us to finally remember. If Earth was not our first home, then why does the planet sometimes feel so hostile to us? We sweat in its heat. We shiver in its cold. We burn in its sun. We choke on its diseases, battle its toxins, and die from its gravity pulling too hard on our spines. Think about this. Almost every creature on Earth is perfectly adapted to its environment. Fur for the cold, scales for the desert, wings for the air, gills for the water. But humans? We must clothe ourselves, build shelters, invent fire, engineer medicine just to survive. We are the least naturally suited species on Earth. Doesn't it seem strange? Unless Earth was never meant to be ours. Unless we are guests or refugees. This idea rattles through anthropology like a suppressed drumbeat. Why do humans age the way we do so differently from other primates? Why do our childbirths risk death far more often than any other species? Why are our spines prone to damage, our teeth prone to rot, our eyes needing correction? Evolution should have refined these flaws. Unless we were not sculpted here, but transplanted. Unless these flaws are signs of adaptation from another world with gentler gravity, a different sun, a different sky. Earth is not wrong. We are. The question then becomes, who brought us here and why? Did we bring ourselves, survivors of a shattered first home? Or were we carried here by something greater, guides, guardians, perhaps beings who saw value in us when our own world collapsed? So what was their purpose? To save us? To seed us? To experiment with us? Every possibility changes the way we see ourselves. Every possibility demands we rethink the story of humanity. But Earth holds more than suspicion. It holds clues. Across the globe, the oldest myths tell of beings who arrived from the sky. Sumerian tablets describe the Anunnaki descending from the heavens, gifting knowledge, shaping mankind. Mesoamerican myths speak of feathered serpents who came from the stars, teaching agriculture and astronomy. Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime speaks of sky beings who walked among them, guiding. These are not isolated fairy tales. They are collective echoes. Different tongues, same song. If Earth was not our first home, perhaps these were the last memory bearers, the ones who remembered enough to guide the lost children of exile into survival. But not all myths are kind. Some speak of wars among the gods, of fire raining from the heavens, of civilizations drowned and silenced. What if these myths are not metaphors, but memories of the collapse of our first home? What if the wars of the gods were the wars that destroyed the world before Earth? Survivors, scarred by destruction, may have carried the memory into story so their descendants would not forget. Yet we forgot anyway. The memory hides, but it leaks. Look at our compulsions, our obsession with leaving Earth. Even before modern rockets, humanity dreamed of the stars. Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, myth upon myth of heavenly ascents, winged chariots, ladders to the sky. And now, with technology, it has become more than dream. Elon Musk, NASA, China, private companies, all racing to Mars, to the moon, to the black beyond. Why? Why spend trillions to escape a planet that already sustains us? Because deep down we remember, Earth is not home. Earth is temporary. Earth is sanctuary but not destiny. Our real story is written among the stars. Yet if Earth was not our first home, then what role does Earth play? Is it prison or refuge? Ark or exile? Look closer and the arc theory makes sense. Earth is unusually stable for a planet. It has just the right tilt, just the right moon to steady its axis, just the right atmosphere to filter deadly radiation. It is rare. Politics follow the human moments. The first international treaty addressing the fragments becomes a spectacle. Countries argue over property rights to artifacts found in their borders. Religious institutions demand vetting. Corporations with space agendas smell leverage. Conspiracy forums gloat and weave ever more elaborate narratives. Among these chaotic public scenes, a quieter, more practical orchestration begins. An international consortium of scientists, historians, ethicists, and indigenous elders, chosen because the elders understand mnemonic culture in ways the labs cannot, convenes to translate, preserve, and interpret. The consortium names itself Palimpsest. Palimpsest's work is both technical and sacred. They use machine learning to thread grooves of myth into physical map modulations. They run isotope labs to confirm origins. They coordinate archaeological digs guided by songs murmured in remote laments. People join the effort in droves. Anthropologists volunteer, sailors map currents, amateur astronomers comb archives, and artists reconstruct ritual patterns into 3D renderings. The movement is a fevered, human kind of worship, not of divinity, but of origin. There are resistances. Some governments clamp down, labeling the searches destabilizing. Militias rise around sites, convinced that access to origin technology is a power they cannot yield. Some religious authorities issue excommunications for those who pursue star god relics. Online mobs threaten scientists who publish too fast, too boldly. Yet paradoxically, the public cannot look away. The image of the alloy lattice, a blackened globe etched with the same spiral motif as a child's cave painting, travels across digital networks and becomes a new icon. A seedling star in a ring. When a living artifact is finally recovered, a sealed pod of biomatter sealed in a cryoshell, preserved in a dry cave, the chemistry of its interior kept in stasis by mineral salts, the world holds its breath. Palimpsest's bioteam opens it. Inside are strands of DNA, organized in a matrix and wrapped in a polymer that responds to specific frequencies. The material is not engineered for war or complexity. It is a library, a deliberately decelerated archive of phenotype and behavior, a teaching device. Its sequences are similar to ours and not the same. The more the team decodes, the more it looks like a toolkit for raising a people on a new world. Seed lines, microbial symbionts to help digest unfamiliar plants, enzymes adapted to different radiation spectrums, and, tucked, almost like a child's toy, a coded lullaby. When the lullaby is played, something strange happens in the lab. Several technicians go silent. One weeps. It is a melody that exists faintly in the human unconscious. A fractal of rhythms we hum when nervous, when midnight leanings make us nostalgic, and it folds around memory like a key. After the lullaby plays, test subjects report sudden clarity about geometry that had previously baffled them. Cognitive tasks speed up. They feel a sense of relation to a place they have never seen. The lullaby is not merely music. It is pedagogy, designed to tune minds to spatial thinking required in interstellar navigation. The implication stuns everyone. The pod is not a relic. It is instruction. The instruction reframes everything. It turns exile into a narrative of intentional migration. The pod suggests agency. Someone planned the journey. Someone planned culture as durable scaffolding, lullabies, nursery rhymes, ritual gestures to pass on coordinate systems, algorithms, survival heuristics. Memory was modular. Biological training in genome sequences, cultural training in myth, architectural training in monuments that would survive cataclysms. Whoever made the archive acted with a terror-tinged sort of tenderness. They tried to transpose a civilization into a new world using every tool they could imagine. Stones that survive time, songs that survive language shifts, DNA that can adapt. The ethical landscape fractures. Palimpsest convenes an emergency ethics council. Indigenous leaders remind the consortium that stories matter differently than data. A myth cannot be reduced to a coordinate without losing something living. Scientists insist on sharing. Governments ask for control. Corporations offer the tech to decode faster. The dynamic becomes ugly and human, the usual clash between curiosity and power. The lullaby leaks. Entrepreneurs sell synthesized origin songs on streaming platforms. A fringe cult forms around the purified loop, promising transcendence. A faction uses fragments of genome sequences to begin black market bioreconstruction. The more that is known, the more the world strains under the knowledge. Yet the human thing persists. People start to remember. Not all at once, and not like a light switching on, but like the return of a faint tide. Artists channel the forms of the maps into paintings that feel eerily familiar. Engineers find that ancient joint tolerances matched in the alloy lattice solve modern manufacturing problems. Pilots with no training report flight instincts while piloting drones as if muscle memory awakens in a lineage. Children begin to hum nursery rhymes in schoolyards and match bizarre orbital patterns unintentionally in their finger motions. Memory is social. It travels faster than single genomes. Culture picks up skewed fragments and evolves them into usable forms. At the level of diplomacy, things become rarer and darker. The existence of planned migration implies originators, people who left and people who stayed. If the stayers exist, the question becomes geopolitical in cosmic measure. Who are they? Have they continued to evolve? If they observe, what are their ethics? Do they regard us as failed kin, as test subjects, or as those who failed at stewardship? Nations debate whether to mount an organized retrieval, to send probes to the coordinates encoded in the lattice. Palimpsest is split, half scientists, half caretakers. The former argue for a measured probe, the latter fear reprisal, contamination, or ethical catastrophe. Sociology shifts in strange, human ways. The education system is retooled in places to incorporate myth-anchored astronomical literacy. New holidays arise that are half mourning and half readiness drills. Some people abandon modern comforts and form communes attempting to re-remember through ritual, isolation, and diet. Others radicalize, convinced that the Earth First narrative has been a lie. They form groups who sabotage launches, believing that humans are meant to atone here. The psychological canvas is messy. Hope mixed with grief, curiosity threaded with panic. In living rooms and cathedrals alike, conversations twist. Questions that once were metaphysical, why are we here, now have a new practical edge. Who are we without our first home? Can a species be defined by a place? If identity is planetary, what does it mean to reclaim a home that may not want us back, or may have never left? There is a generational split. Young people, who have grown up in the leak era, approach the cosmos with eager terror. Elders, who remember the old narratives, cling to reconciliations that revere Earth as a sacred second chance. The deepest change is private. Families press their palms to each other in a new ritual adopted from an old song. Lovers whisper the lullaby into each other's ears, half to recall and half to soothe. The world becomes a place where history is suddenly immediate. Every stone edging a ruin is not only a relic but a message. Children's playground games encode unknowable algorithms like a choreography of memory. The species begins, tentatively, to rehearse the idea of being travelers again, not as disaster escapees but as lineages carrying culture across the dark. The final, inevitable shift comes when a probe is launched. Not a conquest fleet but a patient surgical instrument. A neutrino-tagged, low-energy walker designed to bridge the map trajectory. It is a political compromise, a diplomatic offering to the cosmos. The launch is quiet, launched from an international array in a desert plain with elders, scientists, and children present. On feed, cameras catch faces bleeding hope and terror in equal measure. Months later, static returns. The probe reports radio silence at first, then a reflection of a structure, not living but architected, in a spectral band that matches the lattice's modulation. The coordinates are older than some star catalogs. The routing is precise. An image arrives that looks like sunlight over a valley, rendered through a filter that highlights non-terrestrial mineralogy. The caption the probe sends back is a single phrase stitched in harmonics that, when analyzed alongside the lullaby, resolves into meaning. We are waiting. That small message is the detonator. Not explosions, but revelation. The world fractures and rearranges. People kneel in churches not for prayer but to rethread memory. Governments reframe space programs into missions of reunion. Secret orders that had guarded the fragments for centuries step from the shadows to negotiate with an emergent public. New disciplines form: astroanthropology, mnemonic engineering, and lullaby translation. In living rooms, the old lullaby is played and the infant stirs, as if recognizing a cadence older than the cradle. And yet, amid the high drama, the human truth remains stubborn. Knowing is not the same as belonging. Even with coordinates, even with a live signal, returning is not a matter of technology alone. It is ethical. It is political. It is personal. The species must consider whether the displacement of returners is desirable or arrogant. They must wonder what right they have to trespass on a world that may have continued without them. They must ask whether retrieval is reunion, reclamation, or repetition of the same hubris that may have doomed the first home. The script darkens and brightens in turns. Some factions want to go immediately to reclaim, to take back what was lost. Others argue for waiting, for diplomacy, for a long healing of Earth, so that if we join a broader family again, we do not appear as the grateful scavengers but as willing, steady kin. Entire philosophies bloom. Some celebrate that we were chosen for survival. Others argue we were exiled. The moral calculus is torrid. And all the while the lullaby plays. It threads through the cacophony. A low hum on radio waves, a loop in classical remixes, a whispered cadence at midnight. It is both question and pedagogy, memory and instruction. It says, remember, but not at the cost of what you have become. The oldest directive embedded in it is not coordinates alone, but humility. We moved. Respect the moving. The world stands at a hinge. One path leads to a hurried return that risks repeating ancient mistakes. The other leads toward a slow, cautious reconstruction of identity. Earth as an adopted home, the first world as origin, and a species learning to be both. It is a time of counsels, of rituals, of quiet answers given to children who will be sailors of the dark years hence. It is also a time of greed and scandal and fragile human triumphs. The story, long, jagged, human, continues. The lullaby becomes the unexpected heartbeat of the world. Streets hum with its pattern. Schools integrate it subtly into curricula. Children recite syllables that, unknown to them, are coordinates, vectors, and harmonic keys for cognition. Parents whisper it at night, half as ritual, half as memory trigger. Museums, once silent, begin to play low-frequency loops of it in exhibition halls, beneath glass cases holding ancient fragments. People faintly sense something familiar when they pass. A lost home, a distant sky, a lineage older than their personal history. The planet feels smaller and simultaneously vast, as if Earth itself remembers and leans toward us, impatient with our slowness. Amid this global recalibration, palimpsest becomes something more than a consortium. It evolves into an institution that governs not with authority, but with curation, a living library of origin. It mediates between those who wish to accelerate contact with the first world and those who caution patience. It organizes councils where indigenous memory keepers speak alongside quantum physicists. They debate not only coordinates but ethics, not only biology but identity, not only possibility but consequence. Each debate is a miniature storm. Some participants weep, others laugh nervously, some strike notebooks with frustration. Yet in the chaos, the world begins to learn a rhythm it never had before. The rhythm of remembering without acting prematurely, of decoding without destroying. Others radicalize, convinced that the Earth-first narrative has been a lie. They form groups who sabotage launches, believing that humans are meant to atone here. The psychological canvas is messy. Hope mixed with grief, curiosity threaded with panic. In living rooms and cathedrals alike, conversations twist. Questions that once were metaphysical, why are we here, now have a new practical edge. Who are we without our first home? Can a species be defined by a place? If identity is planetary, what does it mean to reclaim a home that may not want us back, or may have never left? There is a generational split. Young people, who have grown up in the leak era, approach the cosmos with eager terror. Elders, who remember the old narratives, cling to reconciliations that revere Earth as a sacred second chance. The deepest change is private. Families press their palms to each other in a new ritual adopted from an old song. Lovers whisper the lullaby into each other's ears, half to recall and half to soothe. The world becomes a place where history is suddenly immediate. Every stone edging a ruin is not only a relic but a message. Children's playground games encode unknowable algorithms like a choreography of memory. The species begins, tentatively, to rehearse the idea of being travelers again, not as disaster escapees but as lineages carrying culture across the dark. The final, inevitable shift comes when a probe is launched. Not a conquest fleet but a patient surgical instrument, a neutrino-tagged, low-energy walker designed to bridge the map trajectory. It is a political compromise, a diplomatic offering to the cosmos. The launch is quiet, launched from an international array in a desert plain with elders, scientists, and children present. On feed, cameras catch faces bleeding hope and terror in equal measure. Months later, static returns. The probe reports radio silence at first, then a reflection of a structure, not living but architected, in a spectral band that matches the lattice's modulation. The coordinates are older than some star catalogs. The routing is precise. An image arrives that looks like sunlight over a valley, rendered through a filter that highlights non-terrestrial mineralogy. The caption the probe sends back is a single phrase stitched in harmonics that, when analyzed alongside the lullaby, resolves into meaning. We are waiting. That small message is the detonator. Not explosions, but revelation. The world fractures and rearranges. People kneel in churches not for prayer but to rethread memory. Governments reframe space programs into missions of reunion. Secret orders that had guarded the fragments for centuries step from the shadows to negotiate with an emergent public. New disciplines form: astroanthropology, mnemonic engineering, and lullaby translation. In living rooms, the old lullaby is played and the infant stirs, as if recognizing a cadence older than the cradle. And yet, amid the high drama, the human truth remains stubborn. Knowing is not the same as belonging. Even with coordinates, even with a live signal, returning is not a matter of technology alone. It is ethical. It is political. It is personal. The species must consider whether the displacement of returners is desirable or arrogant. They must wonder what right they have to trespass on a world that may have continued without them. They must ask whether retrieval is reunion, reclamation, or repetition of the same hubris that may have doomed the first home. The script darkens and brightens in turns. Some factions want to go immediately to reclaim, to take back what was lost. Others argue for waiting, for diplomacy, for a long healing of Earth, so that if we join a broader family again, we do not appear as the grateful scavengers but as willing, steady kin. Entire philosophies bloom. Some celebrate that we were chosen for survival. Others argue we were exiled. The moral calculus is torrid. And all the while the lullaby plays. It threads through the cacophony. A low hum on radio waves, a loop in classical remixes, a whispered cadence at midnight. It is both question and pedagogy, memory and instruction. It says, remember, but not at the cost of what you have become. The oldest directive embedded in it is not coordinates alone, but humility. We moved. Respect the moving. The world stands at a hinge. One path leads to a hurried return that risks repeating ancient mistakes. The other leads toward a slow, cautious reconstruction of identity. Earth as an adopted home, the first world as origin, and a species learning to be both. It is a time of counsels, of rituals, of quiet answers given to children who will be sailors of the dark years hence. It is also a time of greed and scandal and fragile human triumphs. The story, long, jagged, human, continues. The lullaby becomes the unexpected heartbeat of the world. Streets hum with its pattern. Schools integrate it subtly into curricula. Children recite syllables that, unknown to them, are coordinates, vectors, and harmonic keys for cognition. Parents whisper it at night, half as ritual, half as memory trigger. Museums, once silent, begin to play low-frequency loops of it in exhibition halls, beneath glass cases holding ancient fragments. People faintly sense something familiar when they pass. A lost home, a distant sky, a lineage older than their personal history. The planet feels smaller and simultaneously vast, as if Earth itself remembers and leans toward us, impatient with our slowness. Amid this global recalibration, palimpsest becomes something more than a consortium. It evolves into an institution that governs not with authority, but with curation, a living library of origin. It mediates between those who wish to accelerate contact with the first world and those who caution patience. It organizes councils where indigenous memory keepers speak alongside quantum physicists. They debate not only coordinates but ethics, not only biology but identity, not only possibility but consequence. Each debate is a miniature storm. Some participants weep, others laugh nervously. Some strike notebooks with frustration. Yet in the chaos, the world begins to learn a rhythm it never had before. The rhythm of remembering without acting prematurely, of decoding without destroying. Private individuals experience transformations as subtle as they are profound. A retired teacher in the Irish countryside, long accustomed to humming old folk songs, discovers her voice unconsciously reciting a modulation that matches the lattice's geometry. In the quiet, she sketches the pattern in her garden soil. The design resonates with local flora, guiding growth in ways she cannot rationally explain. Neighbors notice the blooms arrange in concentric waves. She shares the discovery online. It goes viral, dismissed by some as an art project, celebrated by others as synchronicity. In the pattern, humanity sees its first tangible proof that Earth itself is intertwined with the cosmic memory embedded in the fragments. In cities, the effect is more chaotic. Traders in Hong Kong incorporate the lullaby's modulation into algorithms, producing stock market anomalies that some claim are predictive, though others dismiss the claims as coincidence. AI researchers feed the lullaby patterns into neural networks. The systems produce unexpected breakthroughs in machine cognition, hinting at a latent intelligence encoded not in human DNA, but in the broader harmonic resonance of origin. Across disciplines, humanity begins to realize that this memory, this encoded history, is multidimensional. It is not a relic to study. It is an active agent reshaping understanding, behavior, and perhaps destiny. Religious institutions face a fracture unseen in centuries. Some see the revelation as validation of ancient texts. Others fear a new apocalypse. Megacathedrals host midnight vigils where the lullaby is broadcast over loudspeakers. A sacred memory shared globally, a communion of sound and recognition. At the same time, fringe sects arise, preaching that humanity has been exiled from its true home as punishment, that Earth is a purgatory meant to test virtue. Cities experience protests, celebrations, riots, and gatherings that blur the line between ritual, politics, and performance. The psychological effect is global. Anxiety, euphoria, obsession, reverence, often all at once. Humanity collectively remembers, yet no one remembers the same way. The memory splinters into individual echoes, each mind a node in a planetary consciousness attempting to reconnect with origin. Scientists continue to decode the pod sequences. Each day, new insights emerge. Microbial symbionts encoded in the DNA reactivate in controlled environments, producing compounds that accelerate adaptation to Earth's extremes. UV resistance, high-altitude tolerance, cold survivability. Entire fields of biology transform overnight. Geneticists argue about ethics. Governments argue about control. Yet even as they argue, volunteers risk personal safety to reproduce the symbionts for study, feeding them into laboratories under lockdown protocols. The line between science and devotion blurs. Humanity's survival instinct becomes entangled with memory, myth, and longing, as if the species itself begins to awaken to a narrative older than consciousness. Psychologists observe shifts in cognition. Dreams are no longer random. Children report visions of landscapes not of Earth, cities not yet built, skies with unfamiliar constellations. Adults experience déjà vu with unprecedented frequency. The phenomenon is global, subtle, and undeniable. The mind recalls a world it never consciously visited. Entire neighborhoods report synchronous dreaming. Groups awaken with the same image, the same sensation, the same pattern. When these patterns are compared to the lattice map, correlations emerge that are statistically impossible. Humanity is literally recalling an inheritance encoded across generations, suppressed in myth, song, and body memory. In space exploration, the revelation rewrites ambition. NASA, ESA, and private agencies realign missions, not toward tourism or colonization, but toward guided discovery. New probes are designed to match the harmonic frequencies embedded in the lullaby. They navigate the cosmos with a kind of intuition previously thought impossible. A small team aboard a privately funded vessel experiences subtle physiological resonance. Heart rates, sleep cycles, and visual acuity fluctuate in precise alignment with the encoded frequencies. It is as if the vessel itself remembers the trajectory. The first crew experiences a simultaneous terror and elation. They are rediscovering a home they never visited, yet instinctively recognize. Ethics become cosmic. Questions arise. If the first world still exists, is it theirs to reclaim? Were their ancestors merely shepherds or guides? If contact is attempted, Will we be welcomed, observed, or judged? Humanity grapples with humility on a planetary scale. The lullaby repeats, "Remember, but not at the cost of what you have become." Across continents, cultures, and digital networks, that message propagates like a virus of thought, shaping policy, art, law, and philosophy. It becomes clear that humanity is not simply reconnecting with an origin. It is learning what it means to coexist with a memory older than the species itself. Amid these shifts, individual stories crystallize. An adolescent in Nairobi, whose grandmother sang fragments of the lullaby unknowingly, begins to map an entire constellation of previously unidentified exoplanets with nothing but intuition. A musician in Sao Paulo reconstructs the harmonic structure of the pod's biolullaby in a symphony that can, under certain frequencies, induce mild cognitive resonance in listeners. A linguist in Moscow deciphers an ancient text that aligns perfectly with DNA codons in the pod. Humanity's collective unconscious, once scattered and weak, now resonates in chorus. The species has begun the long process of aligning memory, biology, and technology, preparing for a return, or at least for understanding what it means to belong to a legacy larger than Earth. The global narrative reaches a tipping point. The world teeters between awe and panic, between reverence and exploitation. Governments legislate cautiously, corporations act recklessly, cults preach fervently. And through all of it, palimpsest remains a stabilizing node. The repository, the interpreter, the moderator of human aspiration. They insist on patience, study, and humility. "We are not returning yet," the council states. "We must first remember who we are, not just as earthlings, but as travelers, inheritors, and stewards." The declaration sparks debate, but also quiet reflection. Humanity begins to recognize that return is not merely a physical journey, but a moral and cognitive one. The species must evolve inward as preparation for what lies outward. And so Earth changes subtly but irrevocably. Architecture begins to echo patterns in the pod's lattice. Education becomes a form of memory reinforcement. Music, art, and storytelling encode more than aesthetics. They encode survival, orientation, and cosmic kinship. Families, communities, and nations unknowingly participate in a global rehearsal for reawakening, a choreography written across millennia. Children grow up humming the frequencies, adults dream them, and the planet itself feels alive with the echo of the first home. Humanity's collective story stretches back beyond recorded history and forward into stars yet unnamed. Even in mundane moments, walking to work, preparing food, gazing at clouds, people begin to feel the pull of something larger. A continuity threading through existence like a hidden river beneath the streets of the world. It is the memory of a home never truly left, a civilization never entirely forgotten, and a species that is finally starting to see the breadth of its inheritance. And as humanity collectively learns, the lullaby hums softly in the background. We moved. Remember and respect the moving. As Earth adjusts to its new rhythm, subtle cracks appear in the familiar order. Economies begin to fluctuate unpredictably, not from market forces alone, but from the shared resonance of memory across populations. Investors notice patterns emerging in unpredictable cycles. The lullaby's harmonic frequencies seem to influence cognition, creativity, and even decision-making en masse. Entire stock exchanges experience days of unusual volatility, while artists report sudden, unexplainable inspiration that mirrors patterns from the pod's lattice. The planet hums like a living instrument. Some hear it as music, others as alarm. urban life begins to shift. Street layouts and building designs, long optimized for efficiency, start to echo subtle geometric motifs embedded in myths and lullabies from across the globe. Architects who unconsciously incorporate these shapes into plans notice spaces that feel intuitive, calming, or oddly familiar. Pedestrians navigate them with minimal thought, almost instinctively, as if the city itself remembers an order older than any municipal planning. The uncanny sense of belonging triggers a quiet, pervasive psychological adjustment. People feel tethered to a collective memory, simultaneously comforting and disorienting. Education transforms in subtle but profound ways. Early childhood programs introduce songs, rhythms, and games derived from the lullaby, not for entertainment, but as cognitive primers. Children begin demonstrating abilities that once seemed impossible. Spatial reasoning leaps, problem-solving accelerates, memory recall improves dramatically. Universities establish new interdisciplinary departments: astroanthropology, mnemonic engineering, interstellar cognitive studies, blending physics, neurology, archaeology, and mythology. Students report moments of clarity in which they see relationships between stars, DNA, and human behavior as a single coherent system. It is as if humanity is awakening to a dormant blueprint embedded in both biology and culture. On the personal level, experiences deepen in intensity. Families begin holding informal rituals at night, singing fragments of ancient lullabies and tracing patterns on floors or walls. Couples report dreams of alien landscapes intertwined with memory of Earth, merging the known and unknown. Some experience déjà vu on a scale that is almost narrative. They can recount events before they happen. Patterns in daily life emerge that hint at a temporal resonance between human consciousness and the encoded pod memory. Psychologists struggle to categorize these phenomena. Religion, once a primary interpretive framework, adapts, reframing myth as encoded truth rather than allegory. The political arena, predictably, fractures further. Some nations push for immediate expeditions along the coordinates implied by the pod, seeing them as pathways to ultimate power, cosmic inheritance, or survival. Others advocate patience, claiming humanity must first internalize the memory to avoid repeating past errors. Palimpsest operates at the center of this maelstrom, issuing careful guidance. Do not rush. Knowledge is a form of stewardship. Action without comprehension is hubris. Despite their warnings, rogue expeditions form, privately funded missions slipping through regulatory cracks, hinting at future conflicts with global and interstellar consequences. Science itself experiences a renaissance. Quantum physicists detect resonance patterns between the lullaby frequencies and the spin of subatomic particles in newly synthesized materials. Biologists find symbionts in controlled labs that accelerate adaptation to environmental extremes on Earth: UV resilience, thermal tolerance, atmospheric sensitivity. Engineers discover that the pod's lattice structure provides blueprints for materials capable of self-repair, self-orientation, and energy conduction in ways previously unimagined. Knowledge advances not in isolation but in synergy. Myth, biology, and technology converge into a single continuum. And yet, the psychological weight of memory begins to press. Collective anxiety spikes. If Earth was not the first home, what has been forgotten? What dangers were escaped? What rights does humanity have to presume it is the rightful inheritor of this knowledge? Governments, companies, and secretive groups debate, manipulate, and sometimes hide discoveries. Ethical dilemmas proliferate. The resurrection of alien symbionts could solve Earth's crises or devastate ecosystems. The decoded star map could provide unmatched navigation, or expose humanity to unforeseen dangers. Every decision carries disproportionate consequences, amplified by the echo of memory and expectation. Communities respond in diverse ways. In remote villages, elders reclaim ancient songs and dances, understanding intuitively that they encode survival knowledge. In cities, youth subcultures adopt the lullaby in art, music, and street performance, transforming cryptic memory into cultural currency. Families travel long distances to participate in global memory festivals, gathering to sing, trace patterns, and share stories, creating a living bridge between Earth's history and a potential cosmic lineage. The world is alive with the tension of anticipation. Humanity is being trained, consciously and unconsciously, to respond to a destiny that spans planets. At night, under stars, ordinary people feel inexplicable pull. Sailors at sea experience an uncanny orientation, sensing routes they cannot logically calculate. Pilots report instinctive adjustments to flight patterns, mapping anomalies they cannot explain. Even astronauts in orbit feel a resonance between the lullaby and Earth's rotation, the star's position, and their own cognition. The planet, it seems, has become a vast neural network, with humans as its nodes, resonating in tune with a memory older than civilization itself. The quietest, yet most profound change is internal. Humanity begins to confront its identity, not as earthbound creatures, but as participants in a lineage that predates recorded history. Dreams, memories, myths, and instincts merge into a single, unfolding revelation. Children wake with knowledge that appears innate. Adults suddenly recognize hidden patterns in daily life. Artists instinctively create forms that mirror cosmic structures. The lullaby is no longer background music. It is a primer for consciousness, a cognitive scaffolding for navigating both time and space, preparing humanity to interact with an origin that is patient, observant, and potentially waiting. The stage is set. Humanity, caught between wonder, fear, and responsibility, begins to act as though it remembers what it cannot fully name. Cities, oceans, and mountains echo with traces of memory. The planet hums a subtle, omnipresent frequency, a rhythm of preparation. Technology, culture, and biology converge in unprecedented ways, forming a foundation for interstellar understanding. Each person carries fragments of encoded heritage, consciously or unconsciously, creating a web of readiness spanning the globe. Even now, as governments squabble, corporations speculate, and children play, the lullaby threads through every human life. It carries instructions, guidance, and caution, a subtle, persistent reminder. We are part of something older, larger, and enduring. Remember, but respect the moving. The narrative of Earth is no longer linear. It is fractal, recursive, and alive. Humanity has inherited not only a home, but a memory, a responsibility, and a question that stretches across stars. Humanity teeters on the edge of a revelation it cannot yet fully comprehend. Every field of knowledge vibrates with echoes of the first home. Architecture aligns with harmonic geometry. Science interprets biology through memory resonance, and art becomes a medium of encoded instruction. Streets, skies, oceans, and forests pulse with subtle signals that those attuned can feel. Patterns that guide intuition, inspire creation, and hint at a destiny older than civilization itself. Entire populations experience synchrony in thought, dream, and action, as if the species collectively remembers fragments of a world never consciously visited. Ethical debates reach fever pitch, Some advocate immediate contact with the first home, others demand caution, warning that premature action could destabilize Earth or the cosmos. Yet underlying all disputes is a quiet, undeniable truth. Humanity has already been transformed. The species has begun evolving cognitively, culturally, and spiritually to align with a memory that has waited billions of years. It is a reckoning not of technology alone, but of identity, responsibility, and the profound realization that Earth is not the beginning, nor the ultimate destination. The entire world stands at a threshold, poised to step into history, not as mere observers, but as participants in a lineage older and vaster than imagination, ready to engage with a home whose existence has shaped every cell, dream, and heartbeat of humanity itself. And now, as humanity stands at the precipice of understanding, the world itself seems to hold its breath. Every river, every gust of wind, every pulse of light across the skies becomes part of a larger symphony, a cosmic cadence that stretches far beyond memory, beyond comprehension, beyond Earth itself. The lullaby, once a hidden code, now hums through cities and villages, forests and deserts, oceans and mountains, binding every mind and heartbeat into a fragile, yet unstoppable, current of recognition. We are no longer simply inhabitants of a planet. We are inheritors of a legacy older than recorded history, carriers of a story that has waited patiently for eons to be remembered. The first home, long obscured by distance, time, and the limitations of consciousness, is no longer a distant abstraction. Its memory pulses in the marrow of our bones, resonates in our dreams, and whispers in the quiet moments between thoughts. Children awaken with patterns of understanding they cannot yet name. Scientists glimpse principles that defy conventional logic. Artists shape forms that echo cosmic geometries. And all of humanity, whether aware or not, moves in subtle alignment with a rhythm that has orchestrated the survival, growth, and evolution of our species from the very beginning. Every choice, every step, every breath is now intertwined with a narrative that stretches beyond Earth, beyond the stars, and into the uncharted memory of our first home. And yet, with this revelation comes the weight of responsibility. Knowledge without wisdom could be catastrophic. The first home is not a prize to claim, nor a playground for curiosity. It is a mirror, reflecting both our triumphs and our failures. Tests patience, humility, and empathy. It asks whether a species that once believed itself supreme can learn to honor a memory older than its consciousness. Humanity's survival now depends not on dominance, but on harmony with the Earth, with each other, and with the legacy that pulses invisibly through every cell and thought. Across the planet, subtle transformations ripple outward. Cities breathe differently. Infrastructure hums with unintentional precision. People awaken to intuition that bridges generations and species. Communication evolves into a language of resonance and rhythm, a silent understanding that transcends spoken words. Societies begin to reorganize around cooperation, pattern, and shared memory rather than mere survival or conquest. Conflicts, while not erased, are tempered by a consciousness attuned to the long view, one that stretches across millennia, shaped by forces humanity has only begun to grasp. And then there are the individuals, the quiet, unseen observers who feel the pull most acutely. The child in Nairobi tracing constellations with fingertips, intuitively mapping worlds not yet reached. The musician in Sao Paulo translating harmonic memory into symphonies that awaken cognition in those who hear them. The scientist in Geneva observing microbial symbionts responding to encoded memory sequences with awe and trepidation. Each person, each action, Each insight becomes a node in a planetary network of remembrance. Humanity is no longer simply a species. It is a living archive, a conscious instrument, and an awakening entity guided by forces older than thought itself. In the night under the vast, indifferent stars, people pause. They look up and feel the weight of the first home not as a distant myth, but as a living, resonant truth. They realize that the home they inhabit, Earth, is both cradle and crucible. That survival is not merely physical, but psychological, moral, and cosmic. That the choices of today echo across time, shaping the trajectory of a species that is awakening to its deepest inheritance. And in that silence, in that awareness, there is awe, the kind that humbles, inspires, and transforms simultaneously. And then it becomes clear, humanity's journey is not about conquering new worlds, nor proving dominion, nor even ensuring survival for the sake of survival itself. It is about remembering who we were, who we are, and who we were always meant to be. Every step forward is a dialogue with memory. Every creation is a reflection of legacy. Every dream is a bridge between consciousness and cosmic inheritance. We are, in every sense, heirs to a civilization that predates Earth, guided by its memory, shaped by its wisdom, and now awakened to its rhythm. So when the first mission finally reaches the coordinates encoded in the pod, when humanity peers into the unknown for the first time with understanding rather than ignorance, it will not be as conquerors, nor as intruders, nor as mere explorers. It will be as children returning to a parent who remembers them perfectly, who waits not with judgment but with expectation. The first home will see a species transformed, wiser, attuned, and ready to step into its lineage with reverence and courage. And the memory that has endured for billions of years will finally converge with the consciousness that has been shaped to receive it. And in that convergence, everything changes. Humanity understands that Earth was never the beginning, but it was necessary. That struggle, growth, love, and failure were all part of preparation. That memory, encoded in genes, myth, and music, was a tutor, a guide, and a guardian, and that the stars themselves, distant and silent, have always watched, waiting for the moment when those who were meant to awaken finally do. As the sun rises over cities, deserts, oceans, and forests, the world is transformed in ways subtle, profound, and irreversible. People feel it in every heartbeat, in every thought, in every whisper of wind across a leaf. Humanity's consciousness stretches, folding memory, biology, and destiny into a continuum that transcends the boundaries of a single planet. And in that moment, the species knows. It is not lost, it is not alone, it is not limited. Humanity has remembered, and in remembering, it has finally begun to step into its true story. And as the lullaby, ancient, encoded, eternal, hums softly through the air, through bodies, through cities, and through dreams, one truth resonates above all. The journey of humanity has only just begun, but now it moves with understanding, with reverence, and with a memory that will never fade.